Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota podcast, which is your South African number one South African cricket podcast. You want to know anything that's happening in South African cricket, this is the podcast you need to be in. Actually, today, Tim and I were sorting out our accreditation for SA20, so we're going to be doing a lot of SA20 stuff, talking about the game, similar to what we do for the One Day Cup. If you missed out on our Proteas, our discussion around the Proteas and what happened in the Gabba, please go look at the previous episode, which was up. We put it up on Monday, and that talks about everything else, and also kind of gives you on the back end after like 35 minutes. We talk about the One Day Cup, and we talk about the roads that lead to the final. The Lions gone unbeaten, which is why I'm wearing yellow. All the way into that final, because we might actually host the final at the Emirates, and I might have to wear this in public again, which is always awesome, because the last time we were at the One Day Cup earlier this year, it was amazing, and then that's when Weezer Hendricks kind of showed us that he's got what he's got. But this is our podcast. But today we are doing a review of the 2022 review of the Proteas. That includes the men's and the women's team. We had our 100th episode. This is episode number 101. But I don't come alone. I've got Tim Delace with me. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm sure people will be aware that we are doing this before the Boxing Day Test match. So technically, huh? Yeah, I know. I just in case people start nitpicking and saying, "Well, so many runs were scored in the Boxing Day Test match," so you're slightly wrong. We are aware of that fact, but it is still essentially a 2022 review.
Look,
minus one Test match.
I haven't. I don't know if you look at our comments, Tim, on YouTube or anywhere else, but like I haven't had that type of feedback. All our feedback's been good. So please keep on that feedback. Rate and review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to Spotify. Let us go up the charts. So please, support us on that front. We might do a little bit of a rejig in terms of what the show is going forward. And if you have any suggestions, please do let us know. Remember, you can always email me at mpho@1wsr.com if you want to advertise on our platform or on our show. And, Full Quota Podcast, it can have a name just like, the DP World Lions. It could have a name like the SA20 is now Betway SA20. We could be the Betway Full Quota Podcast. We could also be the iTech Full Quota Podcast, even though we've talked so much smack.
We could be whatever you want. Literally,
exactly.
Whatever.
Exactly. And some of myself, and if any of the SA20 teams want to send us kit, we saw the MI Cape Town kit come out. Tim lives in Cape Town. We can go and fetch it for you, and then you can send me, and you can courier me mine. The Joburg Super Kings. If you want me to look pretty in yellow, again, I do look great in yellow. Please do that same thing. But it's our 2022 review of the Proteas. It's going to encompass all things Proteas. So we're going to talk momentum, Proteas Women. We're going to talk about the men's side. We're going to talk about SA20 and maybe some of the stuff that's come out of CSA to see whether we are on the right track. But the one thing I wanted to give as a preamble to this was obviously, Tim, from a holistic perspective, this was the first full year of the new CSA board. I think they came in last year towards the back end of last year. And obviously now this was the first full year. And largely everything's been the same. The only thing that we can look towards is the SA20, which has been very great, Tim. It's been amazing to see the excitement, the different types of advertising and branding. We bemoan, Tim, the lack of advertising for domestic game, but for SA20 we've seen quite a lot of adverts. There's been a lot of hype. The question obviously is obviously this, again, the fans in the stands, and the stories are that some of the games are sold out. The opening game I think is sold out, and I think maybe even the final, which will be held up north here, I think at the Wanderers. So good things are happening in South African cricket. We've gone with the whole pill effect, the one pill that's going to solve everything, that being the SA20. We just now want to see how that's going to translate into all the other forms of cricket, because right now our men's cricket team is struggling in Test cricket, even though it's second in the World Test Championship, and there's so many other things that you can pick in whatever problems, but there's some good things that came out of it, and this year was the SA20, even though the auction did not pick my boy Temba at all, or even Andide. But I'm more worried. I'm more angry about Temba. But that's just an Mpho thing. And if you've watched this podcast, it's an Mpho thing. It's always been an Mpho thing. I'm such a fan of Temba. But let's start with the momentum Proteas, right? This year we had a World Cup. We thought this could be the World Cup. and everything for the Momentum Proteas was building for the World Cup. Nothing much after the World Cup, but we saw a tour of West Indies earlier in the year. They did then play in the World Cup. Then they played against India as well as in India, and then they went to England to play there. It just was a downhill spiral. We started the year on a high, Tim, doing well against the West Indies at home. Going into the World Cup, we started really well, even beating England in the group stages. Only obviously that loss to Australia was massive, but then obviously in the semi-final against the South same England, we came unstuck. And then we went on to the Tour England, and that was a horrible tour. It was a very long tour. They played a test match, they also played T20s, and they played ODIs, and they lost every single match. I thought it was time for a change in terms of the coaching staff, in terms of Hilton moving on after the World Cup, but that wasn't to happen. What did you make of the Momentum Proteas year outside of all of that? Because I was just truly disappointed. I thought this could be the time we make it into the final, because by God, they had a really strong batting lineup.
Yeah, look, it is easy to focus on the negatives and the fact that we had so much hope for the side. But I can't actually. Maybe I'm stuck within the moment with the World Cup coming around. Maybe I'm just stuck within that fever that we are about to host the Women's World Cup, and that's becoming, it's really, it's making headlines. It's in the newspapers. So maybe I'm usually for me on the positive side. Yes, this was bad. Yes, it was disappointing. Yes, the Tour of England could not have gone any more wrong. Yes, I agreed with you at the time. I think we were both agreed at the time. We said as much as a good job Hilton had done, and we are proud of what he did. We at the time felt that we needed a different direction. We needed a new face. Maybe this is sort of like the Gareth Southgate of South African cricket. England football failed at the World Cup. They've stuck with him despite the failure, and now they think they're going to win Euros. I don't think that's true, but that's why they're sticking with Gareth. We had Hilton. We failed at the World Cup. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I have more confidence that we will win the World Cup next month. I have more confidence in that happening than I am in the
19 World Cup.
In the 19. So maybe that is why I'm feeling a little bit more positive about the whole thing. I like the talent that is coming through, the youngsters that are coming through. I saw a little bit of the WSL, which was held in Cape Town, despite the bad weather. I saw some good performances there. So maybe I'm just a little bit stuck with the whole World Cup moment.
So we've got another one next year, so
yeah,
we're going to probably hype them up again.
Yeah, so I'm reasonably confident, and maybe it's because we've had the under-19 and the Momentum Proteas on the podcast. Maybe because I want them back. I want them back next year. You see, that's why. And we'll see. So I think all in all, not a good year, but I do think the future is bright. I think that's the right way to go about it.
Look, I think it's a. If you look at this year, you think it's a downward spiral, but if you look at the last 10 years back, we're on an upward trajectory. It's just we had a little bit of a dip, and I do think in 2023 they're going to come out of that dip, especially playing at home. That World Cup is in the middle of the year. It will be played in Cape Town. It will be played in Quebec. So it's a really, really great opportunity for the Momentum Proteas to try and get into another final. The last time they were in a T20 World Cup, they lost out to Australia in the semi-finals, heartbreaking fashion. So we're hoping for that. And obviously got the under-19 World Cup next year, watching the new generation who've been mixed into everything else. The SA emerging side have had a lot of under-19 girls playing. They lost quite a few games. They came up against a very strong Zimbabwe women's side who just took them apart. up here on the high felt. But to a certain extent, I kind of feel this team is a team that deserves an international coach. I know that CSA doesn't have money, but if there was a team that you needed to invest into in a coach who has a different way of thinking, different way of playing, it might just be that. Because if you look at England, you look at Australia, there's still that massive gap. India's closing that gap over the back end of this past year. And the question for me is, what are the Proteas doing? They haven't been playing a lot of cricket, and that will always be my worry, is that we don't play enough cricket. They got that massive tour to England. The girls loved it, but they came back exhausted. And so for me, it's getting them playing regular cricket, regular domestic cricket, regular high level cricket. And I like the WSL. I need the WSL twice a year. I need the WSL even being played as the domestic season. I'll open it up to 6 teams and let's travel around the country as franchises, or make this an addition to the SA20, but from a women's cricket game, be a little bit more expansive across the 2 formats, just so that we can get our girls exposed to great cricket, because that's what's going to make them better. And I think, and I'm hoping that this is a positive trajectory. Hope 2023 is better for the Momentum Proteas. But Tim, let's look at the men's side. From a test perspective, I think, and I'm going to put up the batting numbers, the biggest problem with the test team, well, the baffling thing for me is, even with these batting numbers, we're still number 2 in the World Test Championship. I do not know how that's happened, but we did beat India. So if you go into 2022, we beat India 2-0. We lost the game in Centurion, but we won the New Year's Test at the Wanderers, and then we won the next test match at Newlands. We then went on to New Zealand. We drew with New Zealand 1-1. Bangladesh came home. We beat them 2-0 in the test series. That really helped us in the World Test Championship. We went to England. We lost there 2-1. That one win at Lords was a really important one for the World Test Championship. And then on top of that, now we are in Australia. We've just lost the test match at the Gabba. We're hoping that Melbourne is better. But this team is sitting essentially one win away from a World Test Championship berth. I think Australia have confirmed their spot, but South Africa are the team that needs to confirm theirs. But with a batting that looks like this, having only scored 2 centuries, and having guys with an average, the highest average here, as you see, is Temba Bavuma, 41. What did you make of this year?
From a batting perspective, awful. Absolutely awful. As you say, how we are in the reckoning for World Test Championship is just a credit to the bowlers. The shining light for me was at the start of that series. You and I were commentating for that series that India were here for. And the shining light for me was the Keegan Peterson innings. In the Newlands Test match, he makes 72 at the first, 82 at the second. It was a coming of a player. It was a player that said, you know what? I know this attack is good, but I am here and I belong. His injury at the moment is a huge loss to South Africa, but it was fantastic to see. So I really loved seeing that innings up close and personal and seeing it there. But the batting in general, there is no sugarcoating about it. The batting in general has been really poor. We spoke earlier in the week about this, about the inability in the technique, the lack of mental strictness, the lack of application. It's all there. It's been there all year. It hasn't changed. There's been a few personnel changes, as you rightly pointed out. Tennis the Brain is now suddenly flavour of the month. I don't know why, but it is. So the batting is a real problem. Unlike the bowling.
Yes, and let's talk about the bowling, because Kagiso Rabada is about to have a year where he's probably going to be the number 1 test wicket taker in the year 2022. I think Jack Leach just took 2 wickets for England in their test match against Pakistan in that final innings. So he's on 46. I don't know if England play another test, but I know South Africa and Australia play another test, and there's a chance that Kagiso, if he gets 2 more wickets, he goes to about 47. Jack Leach is on 46. If he gets to 47, he then ends the year as the number 1 wicket taker in the year.
Yeah. This was England's last test of the series, so I would imagine that's it for them. Of the series against Pakistan. Look, the bowler's done everything you could ask for. Every
Yeah.
single one of those bowlers has contributed in a test match, in a series, in a
And we saw the
moment.
return. We saw the return of your boy Simon Harmer.
We saw the return of Siren Harmer. Siren Harmer came home and he said, you know what? I'm the greatest. He proved it against Bangladesh.
Greatest off spinner ever. Greatest off spinner in the world.
Um,
Which
no, no, but on a serious note, every single one of that on that list of the bowlers delivered. As
yeah.
I said, in a test match, in a series, in a moment. Rabada fantastic. Janssen, look at those numbers for Janssen. Average
Look
of
at those
17.
averages.
It's just incredible for somebody who's so young. He played, half a dozen games. Nokia, fantastic. Olivier was decent before his injury. Lungi Nkidi was good. Even somebody like Vian. As much as we bemoan the fact that Vian can't make runs at this level, he's delivered with the ball. When he was asked to deliver with the ball, those numbers show that he did. Lazard Williams was a good backup when we had to use him. So every single one of those bowlers delivered this year. There's nobody there that you can say that didn't do their utmost to get South Africa 1 foot on that plane to England, shall we say.
Look, I think for me, what makes this, what I could conclude this test year was we beat the teams we needed to beat. We gave guys opportunities, i.e. in Bangladesh, to play test cricket, the Rickletons, the Zondos, and they really took it apart. They took to it. Keegan Peterson as well. Carl Verena scoring that 100 in New Zealand was a highlight. Saddle's 100 in New Zealand was also a bit of a highlight. His 70, I think, at Lords was much better for me. But we beat the teams we were better than. We lost to the teams that we were not. And I think what will happen, I think, in the next World Test Championship, England and Australia are going to sit on their own. And us and India are going to be in that next group with New Zealand trying to hover around. And I think New Zealand might not even be on our level. The only issue, obviously, is how do we... And those games, the reason why we're there, then actually in that New Zealand tier below with the Pakistans and the Bangladeshis is because our bowlers are the reason why we are as good as we are. And I think we end the year as a third best test team in the world, knowing that we lost to in England and we most likely will lose to Australia, largely because Australia has a better batting lineup than us, even though our bowling is just as good and travels just as well.
Yeah.
So moving on to the ODI side, the ODIs were a little bit problematic. On the world, we have a Super League to qualify for the World Cup because we're like soccer. And South Africa find themselves in a bit of a situation. They are sitting in 11th currently, and they need to get to 88 points. They're on 59 points. That means they need to win 2 more games to qualify for the ICC World Cup. Those games are coming up. They've got 3 games against England and they've got 2 games against New Zealand, against Netherlands, right? So you think that possibly they could get there. Actually need to win a third, and the third is against because winning 2 gets you to 79, you need 88. So you need to win a third against England. So one of those 3 England ODIs you need to get through. However, from an ODI perspective this year, it's been quite different. They won a series that didn't matter against India. Then they went on to lose to Bangladesh at home. For the first time ever, they lost an ODI series to Bangladesh at home. We covered that. It was horrible. Great for the Bangladeshis, horrible for South Africa. Then they went on to England and they gave us a mixed bag of results, but largely still disappointing because England are the world leaders. And then we haven't played ODI cricket since. We then postponed we then cancelled the Australia series. But from a Proteas perspective, it was disappointing. I think it was the worst format in terms of performance in the year. Especially the Bangladesh one left a bad taste in our mouths. But looking from a batting perspective, which is the same issue in the test team, A little bit better. Here, actually, this is the wrong one. This is Kai Zondo and everyone else. Okay, so we don't have the ODI batting one. We've got the bowling, but we don't have the batting. But essentially, from a batting perspective, Timber Bavuma's led really well. I think he's Cal Verena, as I'm trying to get it up on my end so we can talk about it at least Tim. Not
Yeah.
Cal Verena. What is it? Quinton de Kock had a really, really great year from a batting perspective for the Proteas in this format. We also saw a little bit of a resurgence for Yanaman Malan, but he wasn't. He didn't do that good. Wait, why am I getting test runs?
I've got the numbers here.
Cool.
It's an error on my fault. I
problem.
sent you the test numbers twice.
Yeah.
So I've got them on here on my side. So numbers wise, they did all right. So we had 5 batsmen averaging over 40. Verena, Klaassen, de Kock, Miller, and Van der Dussen, all averaging over 40. So numbers wise, you look at that, you think, well, crikey, he must have done really well. Performance-wise and results-wise is what let us down. And the big thing was as well was the lack of a direction. So there was muddled thinking a lot in this year. We had Pitnaquire playing 4 games. We had Parnell playing 1. We had Pretorius playing 3. We had Risa Hendricks playing 2. We had Magala playing 1, Fortuyn playing 2. So there was a lot of muddled thinking. A lot of talk this year about Malan. In the ODIs, he did really poorly. 12 matches, average 24. So he's been given...
contrast to 2021, where he was ODI Player of the Year.
Yeah, so he's been given the chance, and he didn't really deliver. He did make a 91 in this year, but aside from that, he made nothing. So, as you say, 2021, I think he was Player of the Year, and this year was a poor year for him. It was Russell's year. 9 matches, an average of 79. It was fantastic, but it wasn't so much as stats always give you a little bit of a muddled thinking. It wasn't so much the lack of runs, it was the lack of, when the games were there to be won, the individuals didn't stand up. The players didn't stand up. That was the problem. I
found we struggled to put down 300 consistently, and I think in ODI cricket, that's where you need to be. I found we struggled against spin bowling, even in our own backyard. I found our tactics from a team composition really weird. Sometimes you're dropping Shamsi, sometimes you're not, even though Shamsi's like your guy. The fascination with Keshav Maharaj just baffled me in 2022. If you look at the numbers there, Ngiti's the best bowler in the ODI format, and that should be it. But if you look at the numbers for Kagiso as well, they weren't necessarily that great. I found Kagiso very tired in this format, but he still put down some really some good numbers here in this format. But for me, I look at this and the reason why our ODI side isn't that great is on that side of the ball. It's the bowling part of it. I think, yes, the batting is not there and I'm not up to scratch, and we got found out. But from a bowling perspective, I really do think they moved away from the team that played really well in 2020. The bowling attack that played really well in the 2019 World Cup, because 2019 World Cup was more of a batting horror show than anything else. And to a certain extent, even in this year, the year post-COVID, you kind of found this, you kind of thought, you actually don't know what the plan of this team was, and to the point where they were fiddling with the spinner role. And you don't fiddle with Tabré Shamsi. He's a wicket-taking spinner. You need a wicket-taking spinner in this format. Andile Petluguaya is a great middle overs bowler. He's one of the best in the world in the middle overs. They lost control of that because everyone was dropping Andile, because everyone was focusing that Andile should be a batter. And yes, he should, but he can make the side as a bowler. And then for me, that was the thing. And I kind of felt this was the format that Mark Boucher left behind. He was like, actually, this is an afterthought. This was a place to experiment. And now they found themselves wanting.
Yeah, well, look, he tried, as I said, he tried Pretorius, Parnell, Petlaquire, and who's the fourth one? And Magala. In that sort of role where you're
That
gonna bowl
7-8
your
role.
yeah, you are gonna bowl your turnovers, but we also need you to score runs. And he never really gave either of them a long extended run. So everyone there didn't actually deliver because they were given 1, 2, 3 games. As you say, that 7 roll was a disaster because he needed more runs on that 7 roll. He wasn't looking at what they were doing with the ball. And when they weren't performing with the bat, he was going, right, okay, off you go, try somebody else.
Yeah.
That was a huge problem. That,
Yeah,
as you
and
said, that was a huge problem.
yeah, and we
And,
saw a
and
lot
the
of
other
Aiden Markram bowling as well, which for me tells me
yeah,
that you're really losing games if you're having Aiden
yeah,
Markram bowl.
yeah.
And
And
to think
Aidan
he's
Markham was playing as a bowler. If we're honest, he was
yeah, he
playing
had a very
because he was going
poor
to bowl 7, 8 overs. That was
yeah.
that was the problem.
Yeah, no,
Um,
and and to a certain
yeah,
extent, going into 2023 World Cup, we thought at 2019 we'd see a lot of youngsters coming in and a lot of the oldies coming up, but we actually haven't seen quite a lot of youngsters. I think Rickleton played in that one game that was rained out against the Netherlands, but that was like in 2021. It wasn't 2022. But we haven't seen any youngsters come through, any of those younger players like Aiden Markham in 2019. Now Aiden's questioned, his state in the team is being questioned. Temba Bavuma was supposed to be out the side already by 2023 because we don't like anybody who's older than 30 in our cricket team. But he's now captaining the side, and there are questions around his form and his captaincy. Quinton de Kock is the only like shining light, the only guy carrying it. So too, Rusty van der Dissen. In 2023, do you see the chances being given to Dewald Brevis before the World Cup?
I hope so. I really hope so, and I hope to see a sort of in that 7 role. It's not that we don't have individuals to play that 7 role. It's that the individuals that they are obsessed with, particularly in the one-day format, they need to move away from, in my opinion. So Pretorius and Parnell should not be individuals that they should be focusing on going forward for me. They need to look at guys who can do that role in a similar way, but are 4, 5, 6 years younger. Your Delano Portitas, your Senor Muthasamis. Those are the guys that they need to look at, who
To a
have a
certain
bigger
extent, from
seat.
Jan Mulder as well, because he's
And
never really played in the
a Vian. All guys who are under 30, 25 to 28, that sort of role. They've got 4 or 5 years ahead of them. And as I say, I hope that they move away from that. And I also hope, we discussed this before, the Maharaj situation. I don't think Maharaj can play 3 formats 2023 onwards. There has to be a discussion with him and say, listen,
Yeah.
right, pick 2. We can't have you all 3. We want to move in a slightly different
Not
direction.
even big two.
No, but
I don't think he deserves to even play two. I honestly think our best spinner in white ball cricket is Tabray Shamsi. The next spinner you pick can't be one who holds up an end, because right now the format has moved from we're trying to save runs to actually we're trying to take wickets. So yes, maybe look for that, but I think Bjorn Fortuin needs to be given a chance. George Linder needs to be given a chance because they take more wickets. Yes, the economy rates are like 5 or 6, whatever it is, but you know that when they bowl, they take wickets. So I think we need a big rethink, because I think our selectors really are fascinated by the economy rate rather than actually the strike rate. Because even in that Durban side, Pernell and Subrian is the one you want to take. You don't take Cash. Cash is great at restricting guys, even in T20. But the biggest problem with South Africa and Cash is that he doesn't take enough wickets, and you need those wickets at the top. And
yeah,
that's my thing, which is why this little experiment fascination with Cash. I get he's a vice captain. I think it needs to end. I think he's a great test bowler and he needs to stay there. And I think if he wants to be an ODI bowler, we have to look at the entire package. There are guys who can bat and bowl and take more wickets than him. So maybe look at those. Mutasami's throwing down runs and taking wickets. George Linder doing the exact same thing. So for me,
yeah.
I and Bjorn Fortuin too. Bjorn Fortin won the lines in that final last year. Bjorn was the guy to get the lines
Yeah.
of line. You know, so
Yeah.
I think we missed a trick in this ODI side. We don't have enough time. The biggest thing is to qualify for the World Cup. If we don't qualify for the World Cup, you'll be hearing mine and Tim's voice on comms for the ICC next year, talking about South Africa qualifying for the World Cup against some of the. I don't want to. They are the associate nation, known as the associate nations, looking for those final two spots going to the World Cup. So I'm excited for 2023 because it could be a year of firsts in the ODI side. But Tim, let's move on to that final one. It's a T20, and T20 is all encompassing, obviously, with the whole cloud of SA20 going around. And we had a World Cup selection after SA20 draft, where everyone looked at the SA20 draft and said, well, the rest of the world doesn't look at your captain as though he's a number one player, but you are still picking him. Lots of mistakes happened at the in that thing because Reza Hendricks batted like a demon. He's still the number one run scorer in the side. Oh, well, it was Riley Rousseau, but Reza was there beforehand. We saw the re-emergence of Riley Rousseau in the side. They went into the World Cup looking as though they could win it. Tristan Stubbs was really important to that. David Miller found form at the right time. However, that game against the Netherlands will always be the reason why we are out. And again, from a South African perspective, the batting was the one that let them down.
Yep, absolutely. You look at the numbers for the year, you're thinking primed for doing well in an ideal position. The side is settled. You've got the X factor in Riley Rousseau, but it failed. When it mattered, the Proteas cracked. There's no doubt. There is no question. As good as the Dutch were, it was a failure. It was a failure of several months of hard work, different combinations, trying different individuals, giving all sorts of guys a chance, bringing Pretorius as a number 3 pinch hitter role early in the year. But again, that was fine because you wanted to see whether it worked. No problem with that. That was fine. But when it came to it, when it actually came to the nitty-gritty of actually winning, the side failed. And everybody, literally everybody, within that strength that we had for this year in the batting, which is where our strength was in this format, faltered. So, great year, terrible ending. Terrible ending.
Yeah, and it's an ending that's going to haunt us for years to come. But from a bowling perspective, I think we saw some really, really good bowling. My biggest worry was Kagiso Rabada in this format. His numbers don't look great, and he played the most games. But Ngiti, Nokia, Shamsi coming up with the goods when they were needed. Yes, Keshav Maharaj is there as well. He did really well in this year, but he was given a lot more opportunities than the rest. He played 17 matches compared to Shamsi's 12, and yet Shamsi still managed to get him with the same number of wickets, and that just goes to my point that I made earlier. However, from a bowling perspective, I don't think I can fault these guys. They were still very good, and I thought, Tim, this was the year we would have a star-studded bowling attack match with a star-studded batting attack like the early 2000s, and it just never happened.
Yeah, it was one of those years where I actually thought everything would click. With everything that's happened in this year, and we'll get into it in the back end of this episode, I actually thought everything would click. Because I don't think you could have any questions about the team that was selected. I don't think you could have any questions with the makeup of the squads, apart from Reza. Yes, we have discussed that one at length. We're not going to discuss that at length right now. I just think mentally, I don't know why, but mentally, it faltered. It faltered. But you're right. You can't fault the bowlers. You cannot fault the bowlers in any time in this year. Wayne Parnell was a smart decision. I won't say anything more, but it was a smart decision because I saw the performance that he'd done all around the world in this format. They saw his strength. This is where they didn't need a lot of runs from him in this particular format. They would have liked more runs, but they didn't need it. What they needed him was the bowls. 16 wickets to 22. You can't ask more than that. So they did as well as they could, but it's just a sad way to end the year in the way that it did. It really is.
Yes, and obviously next year we've got the SA20 that's coming up, and that's going to change the game for South African cricket, even from a T20 perspective. I think you're going to get to see a lot more strength versus strength, and that will obviously change the shape of this team going forward. That happened throughout the year. We also saw, from a CSA perspective, Graham Smith resigning, Enoch Nkwe being appointed as the director of cricket. That changed everything, because you weren't expecting that, and then all of a sudden Graham popping up in SA20 as the commissioner, which seemed a little easy for me and a little opportunistic for me. But hey, I'm not going to touch anybody's bag there. But like, I think obviously we're looking forward to next year, Tim, to the SA20. But yeah, look at everything else outside of the team. Mark Boucher leaving. He had a horrible ODI record, an okayish test record, and a very good T20 record, but he could not take this team to that semi-final. He could not take this team to the final. He's got two very awkward exits. One last year, the T20 World Cup, where we lost the net run rate, and we look at that Bangladesh game in disdain. And then now we look at that Netherlands game going, what went wrong? How would you characterize Mark Boucher's tenure as a Proteas coach?
I need to choose my words carefully. Not a successful one. Mm-hmm. You cannot sit here and say Mark Boucher's tenure was a successful one. You have to point out that there were massive caveats that other individuals had not had to endure. South African coaches have always got off-field issues to deal with. Always. It doesn't matter who they are. They've always had off-field issues. We just have to go back to Otis Gibson and that World Cup. There were lots there that happened that definitely hampered the side, shall we say. Here, the COVID situation had a massive effect, not just on the Proteas, but on every single international side. Having to take these massive squads to around the world, then trying to give these guys enough time so they're not just going from hotel to hotel to hotel. That was huge. The SGN here is having to deal with that. You could argue due to his own failings, but the point is he still had that to deal with when he would rather have been focused.
Came into 2022 with as well.
Yeah, you still had to deal with that when you want to focus on the issues on the field. He had that to deal with. You had the pressure because the team knew that they were in a good place in terms of the Test cricket. They knew they were in a good place, the T20s. They knew they had a good chance at the T20s. Not that they were necessarily favourites, but they knew they had a good chance. And the exits from both of them. I know the previous one is the last ship. The exits from both of them were errors, big errors made by him and the coaching staff in both departments. As much as the players faltered and they're the ones out there performing, both teams were not given the right plans, the right game plans, the right ideas to win the games that they absolutely had to win. That was the problem in that. So it took our Test team forward. Yes, we are still forward, yeah, but we are still sitting with the top six that you have no confidence that can make 300. You can't sit there and say the top six is going to make 300 tomorrow with any confidence whatsoever. So we got the results, but we're still there with the problems. One day's was a mess. It was just a mess. At no time did Mark Boucher know his best 11 this year at any stage for the one day set up. T20s, he knew the best 11. He definitely knew the best 11. he
But he
didn't
just didn't.
know how to get the best out of them. When it
Yeah.
mattered, he didn't know how to get the best out of them when it mattered. So, not great.
Yeah, look, I agree with you on a lot of those aspects. I just thought he was a great coach. Didn't think out the box a lot, and just couldn't, like, we're stuck with the same problems. You can look at that Gabba Test match and say we're back to 2019. Inexperienced batting lineup against a really great bowling attack and a really great team, experienced team, and we're having the same issues that we had. And so, in as much as we've had the highs and lows, and we're sitting number 2 in the World Test Championship, was back in the same thing. Maybe the one thing you can say is the mental fortitude, the ability to beat India at home with an India side that was looking really good. That for me probably was his highlight, and he really enjoyed that win. So for me, I'd say that. And on the T20 side, there's a blueprint there that should the new coach come in, use it, could possibly lead us to bigger and better things, and it all started from him. So yeah, look, it hasn't been great, but we hope 2023 is better for the Proteas. Yeah, Tim, I think looking into 2023, what are you looking forward to? Obviously, we've got that Men's World Cup in India that we want to get to, but there's a lot of things we need to get through before then. And obviously, SA20, elevating our T20. Anything else that you're looking forward to going into 2023 for the Proteas?
I'm looking for a different game plan. I just think there's been an element for the last 3 or 4 years where everything has been the same. Okay, we've had different coaches, but the game plans essentially have been the same. I want something different. I don't want baseball. Baseball is something different. That's fine. They can have their baseball. I just want something a little bit different, a little bit out of the box, a little bit more positive. Just a little bit more positive. When the chips are down, it doesn't matter what form. The chips are down. I just want the guys to just think, you know what? If it's a bad ball, I'm gonna hit it for 4.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be here. Bad ball, hit it for 4. Try to get that. That's gonna come through mental strength and yes, a mental coach. Hopefully, a mental coach. So now Proteas set up. Get a mental coach in 2023. A full-time one. There we go. That's what I want.
Cool. That's what we need to use the SA20 money for, a mentor coach. So if you're watching here from CSA, well done on 2022. Wasn't the greatest one, but you got through here. Got through it. Hoping 2023 is great. Under 19 World Cup. Hoping the girls do a really, really great job. Expecting great things. It's happening here in South Africa. So please do go watch that. Women's World Cup, T20 World Cup here in South Africa again. Please do watch out for that. Before the World Cup, Australia come here. India's also going to come next year in the women's team. So please do go support them. They could be the ray of light in 2023. And then we have the Men's World Cup, 2023 World Cup. We are going into 2023 unknowing of whether we're going to be at that World Cup, unknowing of what the World Cup qualifiers are going to go through. But the best believe what's going to happen is you're going to get it all here on the Full Quota podcast. Thank you very much, Tim. For a year of cricket podcasting and joys and laughter and everything else. And we hope that next year is going to be as good, but even better than what we expect the Proteas to be. So thank you to everybody for the support. This is probably going to be our last podcast for the year. We'll probably podcast in the new year to tell you who won the CSA One Day Cup and prelude into the SA20. But outside, we actually might do review podcasts, so we'll see you then. But anyway, there's going to be nothing before Christmas. So Merry Christmas, Tim. Merry Christmas to our listeners and our viewers. Remember, you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, on the One World Sports Radio channel. You can also get us on Twitter, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Anchor Podcasts. So I think for myself, Tim, goodbye. Merry Christmas. Enjoy the cricket on Boxing Day. We'll see you probably before the new year if something horrible doesn't happen. Hoping that test match is in 2 days, because the whole point of Boxing Day test match is to give us these 4 days of sitting at home and eating leftovers. So but yeah, all the best for 2023 to everybody, and goodbye, good night, and lesale kakahiso.